Today we're going to be checking out Pokemon Hidden Place, a fan game that sets itself in a fully customized new region named Ariel. It's got a ton of new fakemon and new regional forms that will make your jaw drop. But that isn't the only thing. They've got an entire new storyline, Pokemon up until Generation 9, and an entire new gym system. So join me as we uncover all the secrets the Ariel region has to offer us. The game starts off by introducing you to the local professor, Fresna, and she's looking for trainers who want to help around with her research of various mysteries of the region. We of course comply, pick our character, introduce ourselves as Zwiggo, and head right into the game. As we wake up from our nap, our mom tells us that our friends are outside, so of course we need to go and say hi. As we head outside, we see a pink-haired girl named Cheria and a blonde boy named Domeshi. They're here to bring us to the professor's lab because us three are going to be her new assistants. So we group up together and head to the professor, who's incredibly excited to see that people are willing to help her. And she needs our help with uncovering an ancient legends from this region, but the information we have at the moment is quite scarce. So we'll be going on expeditions together so we can find out more about them. And our first one is going to lead us to the ancient ruins located north of Dew Town. So we head out and reach the Normalina ruins together, and we see that they're filled with Arceus statues. These ruins are rumored to have been made by our long-forgotten ancestors, but no one has actually found out what they were made for. As the professor is trying to explain that the statues are very old and might be unstable, Domeshi touches one of them and it crumbles apart. He just committed one of the worst crimes ever, destroying cultural property, but this turned out to be a good thing, as a rare mineral was inside of the statue that the professor is definitely willing to research. And so she starts wondering that other places like this might also have other hidden objects inside of them. So she wants us to go and explore the region and find out as much about these ruins as we can. But before we do that, we need our very first partner Pokemon. And for that, she brings us back to her lab, where we get the choice between Toddbear, Gautier, and Makagwa, which were three super cute fakemon, and I honestly didn't know which one I should have picked. But in the end, I went with Makagwa, the water monkey. But I would love to know which one of these three cuties you would pick up and head on an adventure with. So let me know in the comments down below. My friends are happy I finally have my starter Pokemon and will be waiting for me on round 101 to challenge me. The professor then of course gives me my starter pack with her balls, potions, town map, and even EXP share. She's also going to send some ancient books over to Cheria so she can analyze them, so we know where to look next, while the professor is going to go to Teposhli town to visit a friend of hers that knows a lot about ancient stones and minerals, so he can research the one that we found. I then head to the first round and stop by my friends to have our first Pokemon battle. Their teams are honestly pretty weak and weird for a rival. They don't have starter Pokemon and seem to just be running with Pokemon they like, as Cheria has Togepi and Cherubi, which get destroyed by Water Gun and Echoed Voices, and Domeshi's Nickit and Shellos pose no threat either. They're glad to see we'll be able to hold our own though, and tell me where to head next, which is Lando Bello Forest, which will eventually lead us to Thundra City, and also the place where the Sacred Tour starts. But you may ask, Zwiggo, what's the Sacred Tour? Well, it's actually just a gym challenge. You have to complete 8 sacred trials, which are being held in paradises of the Ariel region, with each one having their own unique obstacles and typing, and if you manage to complete all 8, you can become a shardbearer, which I guess is sort of like becoming the Pokemon champion. We part ways with our friends and head inside the forest to capture our first regional Pokemon, a Hoot Hoot. And he's finally gotten the typing he deserved all of these years, Flying Psychic. So of course I'm going to trap it in one of my balls and head straight to Thundra City. I could have headed straight to the trial, but decided to check out the town first, and in one of the houses I found a very interesting character. Her name is Veneria, and she just came back from her tour in Kalos. She raised a lot of money by doing this and is going to invest it back into this region, as it's clear to her that the Grand Paradise has deteriorated so much and is in need of some true restoration. She eventually notices me and sees that I have just started my trial challenge. So she comes up to me and says that she's going to make sure that the Grand Palace will be ready by the time I have completed all the trials, so that if we would ever challenge for Shardbearer, it will be done in the right and most beautiful way. This gave me a lot of motivation to start my trials, so I headed straight to the Electric Paradise for my first one. Here we get an explanation on how to get through it. There is these floating electric rocks that you need to push through electrical currents to turn them off. Once you've done that, the path will be clear and you can move on to the next one, until we eventually reach the trial leader. On our way, we also had to fight some trainers, which caused our Magakwa to evolve into a very angry monkey named Macabra. With him, I could go and challenge the trial leader, Zabri. And while we should be at a disadvantage with our team here because we have a water and flying type against our electric types, our echoing voices turned out to be all we needed, as it kept stacking up damage every time we used it, and so Macabra was able to defeat Pincurchin, Magnemite, and Joltik by just shouting at them. This not only gives me the Charge Beam TM, but also access to Voltio Cave. Unfortunately for us, the trial assistant has some bad news. There's trouble inside of this cave, as some weird and shady characters have entered and seem to be looking for something important, so we'll have to go and check it out. But first, I grab my next fakemon, Shuer, who definitely doesn't need a shower. However, I do feel like he looks a lot like Smoliv, just a lot derpier. With my little Olive by my side, I headed to that cave and saw that it was taken over by Sinistra grunts. And from their name alone, we know they're going to be the bad guys in this story. Once we're done beating up some of their robotic-looking grunts, we reach one of their admins at the end of the cave. There was supposed to be a legendary Pokemon here, but unfortunately, there doesn't seem to be anything. Her name is Jenna, and she knows we've been following her to try and fold their evil plans, or whatever they're up to. So she throws out her Purlion, which I drown out with some water guns from Macabra. Her next Pokemon, Pancham, gets confused by Hoot Hoot, and her Woobat also gets shot out of the air with a gun made of water. Once she's defeated, she says her boss is going to kill her when she arrives empty-handed. But she isn't too worried about me, as she calls me a little nuisance just before leaving. Once we head outside of the cave, we meet up with Domeshi and Charia. They overheard Jenna say something about a legendary Pokemon having migrated to somewhere else, and that Sinistra would have to go to its ancestral place in order to find it. Charia has also been reading up on the books and has found out that the legend that the professor is researching is supposed to lead you to a hidden resting place for legendary Pokemon. And if we keep researching and somehow find this place, we could revolutionize the Pokemon world. But we don't know where to search next, so we'll just have to head to our next sacred trial in Crystal Town. This was a long journey through the Pink Mushroom Cave where we found our new regional form of Ducklet, a fairy flying type. With this cute little duck on my team, I reached Crystal Town and met up with my friends again, who told me to go to the Crystal Plaza, which is a very cool area with a lot of food trucks and sometimes terraces where you can have drinks. But there was also a woman here who wanted me to take her Minishiwoof off her hands because she couldn't take care of it anymore. This is another new dog-like Fakemon that's a ghost fairy type, but I got incredibly lucky, as mine turned out to be shiny. So you better believe that this good girl is going to stay on the team until the very end. And I also immediately wanted to test him out, so I went over to Domeshi, who was eating a Pokechanga, and if we manage to defeat him, he'll give me a bite of it. He's only decided to add one new Pokemon to his team, and that was Growlithe, so we just killed that with Brine, and the Nicotin Shellos were no problem, just like last time, as my duck kept slapping it with its wings. After our fight, Domeshi runs away because the Pokechanga is kicking in and he's about to shit his pants. Our next destination will be Cherry Forest, where our following trial will be. On our way over there, we grab our next Fakemon, Cherry Lare, a dark ghost type, which means it only has one weakness, being fairy. So with this Scarecrow now standing in our field, we can safely reach the trial. Here we had to go through a cave that was lit up by these pink crystals. But if those crystals weren't there, you couldn't access the next area. And in order to get more crystals, you have to defeat all the trainers. This eventually led me to the leader, Jazz, who was ready for a beatdown. He immediately started off with two Fakemon, a regional Ducklet and a Gemisol. While both of them got taken out with Venoshocks from Macabra, his last Pokemon, a shining blue Sylveon, wasn't going to go down as easy, as its special defense was pretty high and it took Venoshocks way too well. So after it defeated my Macabra, I brought in Munishiwoof to lower its special defense with Fake Tears. And with a couple more Psybeams from Hoot Hoot and two Draining Kisses from Ducklet, this monster of a shiny evolution was finally defeated. With another win under our belts, Jazz tells me to head to Edge Mountain next because we'll be crossing it to try and get to our next challenge. However, on our way there, we have a strange encounter with a woman that's talking to an Yuxi. The Yuxi is far away from its normal resting place and seems in distress. She knows it's in need of assistance and asks me to help out. So we go after it together and find out that Team Sinistra is on the prowl again. We quickly find out that they've placed a tracker chip on Yuxi and are trying to follow it somewhere, in the hope that they would eventually find the ancestral place. So being the good guy that we are, we take down as many grunts as we can and evolve 2 of our Pokemon, as Hoot Hoot turned into a very cool looking psychedelic Noctowl, and Charizard evolved into Darkashire, which in my head seems like a dark type Hatchrim for some reason. With this new power surge, we followed Azalea all the way to the 3rd Cenote, where we see that Yuxi has taken refuge with the trial leader. She's willing to protect the legendary Pokemon while we take on Azalea. So let's take out this woman before bad things start to happen. The battle starts off great as my Munishiwoof licks down the Gothita she sends out without much resistance. The next Pokemon Weavile goes down by a Brine from Macabra and 2 Sucker Punches from Darkashire. The last Pokemon Liepard gets Shadow Punched twice and finished off with yet another punch of the Sucker variety, but even though Azalea is defeated, she still doesn't want to give up. That's when Ariel gets incredibly mad and summons Water-type Pokemon to scare off Azalea and comes up to me to give me her thanks, as without me, the Lake Guardians certainly would have been captured. The Lake Trio then goes back to where they belong, and we need to leave because it's time for us to take on the Rock Trial. This trial starts off in a desert where you need to go through sand traps which lead you to different rooms, until you eventually reach the vase puzzle. Here you have to go into buildings and fight trainers. Once defeated, they will give you a clue at where a hidden button is placed, and once you press it, you can move on to the next house. Once you go through all of those, you get into the underground library where you have to do some quizzes, and once you have shown your intellect, you get to face the woman you just helped out, Geonita. She only has 3 Pokemon. All of them got killed by Brine from Macabra. But I have to highlight that her regional golem, the Fire Rock type, is an absolute monstrosity. I love the design of this thing. It looks like it has crawled straight out of a volcano and is ready to erupt on everything. But even with this powerhouse, it didn't matter as my water eroded her rocks. With my 3rd trial completed, I head back outside and am surprised to see that the professor was here looking for me. She and Geonita know each other very well, but they haven't seen each other for years and are very excited to meet again. But the real reason why the professor is here is because she wants to show Geonita the mineral we found. She's normally an expert on this, but has not seen something like this in her entire life. So unfortunately, she can't tell us anything about it, but tells us to go and investigate the surrounding areas and head to Lost City, as there might be some clues hidden there. So while the professor goes and investigate, I need to go to the watery cavern to join them, but I'll need the HM for Surf to get through, which she luckily hands me. After a good old hike through the watery caves, we eventually reach the Rune Desert. This is where we meet up with the rest of our crew, and the professor explains that we need to go to the Lost City, which is one of the treasures of Ariel. It's been submerged in the desert for a long time and is basically uninhabited, and the only way to get there is through this very warm and harsh environment. After seeking in the sand a couple of times, we do manage to make it there, and once we enter one of the old temples, the professor finds vases that all have the same inscription on them, which is very weird because the people who used to live here hated writing. It was a sin for them, so these vases are looking very out of place. Domeshi doesn't really understand what all of this means, so he goes up to a vase and touches one of them. This opens up a secret room which leads us to an ancient library, which has never been found in all of these centuries, so it must contains some knowledge nobody has ever seen before. In the middle of the room, there's a book sitting on a pedestal, and we all go up to it to check out what it means. And it reads the following: when your fate dims, the hidden guardian will emerge. When culture is lost, the most beautiful guardian will show itself. And when the spirit is weak, the brave guardian will show up. When these guardians emerge from the hidden place, they will end any enemy in front of them. To prevent this from happening, the guardian of the mystic forest will keep them at bay. The professor is incredibly intrigued with this information, as it states that the author of this book has the same name as the founder of this region, Rodolfo. She would very much like to investigate this place further together with my 2 friends, but they realize that my trial challenge is also important, so they will stay here while I continue my adventure. So we go back through the watery cave and run into a trainer with a Bipelian, a Pokemon that I unfortunately never found myself, but I thought, hey, it's new, let me show you. Shortly after, we reach our next destination, Ariel City, where we get inspected by a green-haired person. They took a look at my clothes and said, nope, these are trash. Let me get you some new ones, meet me at the clothing store. Here we get the Onyx outfits, which you can always change if we go to the Pokemon Center, but for now we'll just stay in our adventurer clothes. Our journey then led us through a dark forest that eventually ended up in the Threshold Megazone, where we see a glimpse of the next Paradise leader, and she can just teleport anywhere because she has ghostly powers, which made me realize this next trial was going to be the ghost type trial. My suspicions were right, as the trainers inside of this new paradise actually had a new form of Duck Trio named Candrio. I just hope that whoever trains them doesn't forget to put them out when they leave the house. This dark forest eventually led me to a swamp that was incredibly hard to traverse, as the main way to get around was to run through these holes that made you run in darkness, and without the TM for Flash, it's pretty hard to see in the dark. I did get a new fakemon named Agualtadrillo, basically an avocado crocodile. He must also be related to the Ludicolo family because he's a water grass type. And after adding him to my team and going through the newly found Sayak City, we ended up in the Ghost Paradise, where we had to lit candles in order to find our way through the dark forest. While I was defeating some of the trainers, my Darkature evolved into Certature, a monstrosity that comes straight out of the shadows of Dia de los Muertos. And can I just say that this is one of my favorite Fakemon designs I think I've ever seen in a Pokemon game. I mean, what's not to love? From the big hat to the scary mask, this guy is going to stay on my team forever. After this, I reached the leader Catherine, who will take my soul for eternity if we don't beat her in this battle. So let's get it done quick. But as it turns out, the only thing I needed was my newly evolved Certature, because it has the ability Moxie. Every time he knocks out a Pokemon, his attack stat gets raised. So we were able to Shadow Claw, Spiritomb, Drifblim, Mimikyu, and eventually the regional form of Exeggutor, Hexaghost. I'm afraid that the Execute who were supposed to evolve into Exeggutor died during the evolution process. Luckily, we were able to put them out of their misery, which means we're done with our 4th trial. In the meantime, the professor and my friends have found out that somebody invented a force field mimicking a giant Pokeball all those years ago to trap the Guardians. But just when they were about to find out more, the leader of Sinistra finds them and tells them that all of this information is already known by her, and that she's actually the one who covered up this library. Now that we know what Sinistra is up to, Sinistra can't let them research any longer and is going to have to lock them up. So now it's up to us to find them and save them. And we do that by heading to Legacy Cave, where we find a new shady character who seems to be looking for his brother together with a high dragon. This path eventually led us to Alex Town, where our next trial also took place. This turned out to be the grass type trial. You have to go through a maze of hedges, avoiding Pokemon and picking up berries. Once all of the berries have been picked up, you can reach the leader. Her name's Vero, and she starts off with a regional form of Hydrapple named Sidraplin. It's basically, what if Hydrapple was actually a rotten apple, because this guy is a grass poison type. Luckily, all we needed to take it down was my Noctowl's extra sensory. The following 3 Pokemon, Ludicolo, Tangrowth, and Whimsicott, all went down by hurricanes, and I guess this entire gym got blown away by them too. After collecting our 5th seal, the leader of Sinistra decides to show up right behind us, because she wanted to see with her own eyes who was hindering her plan so much. And like any evil boss, she doesn't believe it's a kid's doing. She calls the gym leader weak for losing against a child and tells me where my friends are. We have to go to the cavern Megazone, where we'll have an opportunity to prove ourselves in a battle in order to free them. The gym leader, however, doesn't trust this and is going to send somebody our way to help us out. On our way to our friends, my starter finally reached its final form, Chamanagua, and now she looks like a beautiful ancient druid monkey that is going to cast a spell on you if you ever stand in her way. Once we reach the cavern, we have to defeat both admins Jenna and Azalea again, and besides one of them having a Dracula form of Swoobad, there was really nothing special about these fights. Once we go deeper into the cavern, we finally find our friends and a purple-haired woman. Her name is Jacaranda, a very renowned scientist that helps out other professions of the region, but she recently got captured by Arcadia, the boss of Sinistra, to work on some inventions for them. She created a device that was supposed to make her Malamar power up, but instead, she's been using it to control all the grunts. That's why they all wear those weird robotic masks, because they're under her mind control. But she also knows how to shut down the system, so we'll have to protect her while she stays behind to do so. Unfortunately, we run into another admin who's well aware of what we're about to do and explodes the lab right behind us while Jacaranda was still inside. Just after the explosion happens, a woman teleports in and tells Sinistra to scram. They seem to be pretty scared of this heiress and leave us alone, and the heiress says that she's here to protect us. Unfortunately, because of the explosion, everybody in the back there should be dead, and that's when the professor realized that we're still kids and should probably be brought away from here. She also understands if we want to stop our trial challenge because of what just happened here, but the heiress promises to protect me in my next endeavors with her special powers. And while she teleports everybody else away to Nivea City, I'll be going on foot to continue my journey by traveling through cold tundras and icy caves while completing puzzles, which lead me through a snowy forest that ends up in Nivea City. But the professor immediately says that there's bad news. Cheria wasn't feeling well and has gone off into the frozen forest and hasn't returned yet. So now we're tasked with finding her to see what's up. On our way over to her, our Shure evolved into Shokumtite, which looks like a fusion between Blossom and Cherrim. Two Pokemon I'm not the biggest fan of, so I can't wait to replace this thing. After this, we find Cheria standing on top of a cliff, saying that this doesn't make any sense. It was supposed to be a beautiful adventure, but it turned out very dark and gloomy. And she doesn't want me or Domeshi to die just like Jacaranda did, so we try to calm her down by saying that we're strong trainers and that nothing like that is ever going to happen to us, but she doesn't really believe that. So to make her feel better, I beat her up in a Pokemon battle, which cleared up her mind. Now she's ready to head back to the professor with me to see what her next step is going to be. Because we're in the mountains now, I decided to change to the winter set and then head to the house where the professor resides. Here we learn that the name of the heiress is Luna. She basically looks over the region just like the guardians do over their paradises. There's also two more people at the table here who are the guardians of the next paradise that we'll be taking on. Or at least the old guy is the current one and the young lady is going to be the next as she's being recruited by him. Luna says that we shouldn't worry about Team Sinistra for a while as she'll be keeping an eye on them while we go ahead and do this next trial. So we go out and head to the ice paradise where we need to complete some ice puzzles before we reach both leaders. First we have to take on Gandalf's granddaughter Shiv. She only has 4 Pokemon and 2 of those immediately fall to my dancing flower. When Lapras and Titan are defeated, Ducklet comes out and takes out the next one, Crambominable. This forces her out into her last Pokemon, a regional ice-type form of Lopunny. And I feel like this thing could have been in Pokemon Legends Arceus. It looks so good that it could actually be in the next Pokemon game. But that's enough simping from me. I bring out my Minishiwoof and use one playtime to defeat it. Gandalf himself was next, and no, he's going to let me pass, as he only has an Arctozolt, Walrein, Mamoswine, and Mega Abomasnow to deal with. And with Shamanagua's signature move Aqua Spell, this was pretty easy, as Aqua Spell has 90 base power and the ability to burn, paralyze, or poison the opponent with a curse. So once we were done spamming that, I acquired the 6th seal and the TM for Ice Beam. We then head outside of the paradise and run into Domeshi, who's surprised to see that we've already collected 6 seals and would very much like to know how strong we've become. He has a team that's incredibly weak, but he does have a new Pokemon called Steelinist, which is a dark steel type, and its head is in the form of an old pen. So we immediately wrote it off as useless and destroyed it with Shamanagua. The rest of his team stood no chance, and once the battle was over, he told me to go to Legacy Cave, where we would find the road to Gothra Village, our next destination. But once we get out of Legacy Cave, we run into our very worst enemy. She's trying to explain why she's trying to find the hidden place and get the Guardians back. You see, she wants to change the world and get rid of humans because they're a plague. Because before the humans were here, nature was beautiful, everything was going its merry way, and Pokemon could live in peace and harmony. But humans have ruined all of this. But she thinks there is a way to bring back this balance, and she's going to try and achieve it. After we tell her that we don't believe in what she's doing, she leaves and says that she will one day open my eyes to the truth. After this, I ride on the back of a Dragonite who brings me to Gothra Town, a legendary place that's been carved into a mountain and is rich with dragon-type Pokemon. There's stone bridges running over a cavern so we can reach other sides, and the people here are very respectful of their heritage. One of the other tunnels here, however, leads to the wise old dragon Drampaw. When we reach him, we see another black-haired trainer talking to him. He's planning to go to the Dragon Paradise to test himself because he's chosen for something. He says that if we want the seal, we should join him at the Dragon Paradise and challenge him there. The trial here consisted on stepping on buttons so that floating rocks would stop floating and I could run over them. Not very dragony, but once you reach the end of the cave, there's a Dragonite there who will bring you to the leader. We realize that the guardian here is the kid we just saw. His name is Bull, and this is his first time ever defending the seal. So we'll go all out on him so he learns not to hold back. He leads off with 2 dinosaurs, Tyrantrum and Dracozolt. Both of them get frozen back into the Ice Age by Chamanangua's ice beams. The fakemon Tetradrill looks like it's been digging way too much like a worm and should be worrying more about this ice beam I'm about to shoot in its face. Once the long serpent is down, the last two Pokemon, Archaludon and Mega Altaria, are no problem anymore, and so we end up winning the battle. Bull actually very much enjoyed this first battle and can't wait for the next. He also explains that we can get to the final trial if we go through the frozen forest. This then led me into a crystal cave where I managed to find a special form of Gumi, a rock poison type that looks a lot less slimy and a lot more pointy than normal. We also learned that Sinistra is looking for something in this cavern, but we're not alone. This time we get the help of one of the strongest trainers in the region, Veneria. You know, the one who wanted to rebuild the Pokemon League for me so that it would be ready for my coronation. Yeah, she ends up destroying every grunt and two of the admins to clear the path for us. However, the third admin, the one that blew up one of our friends, is here too. And he can't let me pass because he's going to fulfill his mission by taking the dragon egg that resides in this cave. But we're gonna try and stop this madman. He leads off with a Gengar that gets destroyed by Shadow Ball. His next Pokemon Gyarados gets sparked by Manishiwoof. Pyroar then gets washed away and Zweilos gets play roughed. This guy might seem menacing, but his team is an absolute pushover, and after the battle he says that it matters little because Azalea's plans are already in motion and are even nearing completion without this dragon egg. Duncan then leaves and ends up running into the guy we saw earlier looking for his brother. This guy says that Duncan is in fact his brother but has lost his memory somehow, and he's going to try and recover it for him. Duncan doesn't want anything to do with this person because he doesn't know him and ends up leaving. They part ways. We get back to my point of view and I walk over the creaky bridge to enter Smoky City. Here we meet Luna, who has found out something about Sinistra. Apparently there's a book written about all of their antics and actions, but some pages have been ripped out. Luckily she has found a tale of a whispering woman that knows everything about them, and we're going to have to find her so we can find out more about Team Sinistra and where they might be striking next. We then go to Luna's house, who has made an appointment with Catherine. With her ghostly connections, she's able to teleport us to the woods where the Whispering Woman resides. Catherine then starts chanting the spell in order to summon her, and we get to hear what she has to say. She says that the minerals we found should not be combined because these minerals represent light and darkness, the balance of good and evil. They're basically the key to accessing the secret ancestral place. We explain that Team Sinistra are trying to look for this ancestral place, but the Whispering Woman says that the woman in charge, Arcadia, is being controlled by something else. And if we really want to stop Team Sinistra, we'll have to go to their lair, as they already have the dark mineral themselves, and if they manage to get the light mineral off our hands, the world will receive the wrath of Arceus's guardians. After hearing this, we leave the Whispering Woman and start searching for that Sinistra lair, so we can stop all of this from happening. We ended up finding a hidden hatch under a bush that led me underground. This underground base turned out to be their evil lair, as scientists immediately started attacking me. After defeating some of them, my Sliggoo ended up evolving into Goodra, and with the poisonous glands on its tail, it's ready to intoxicate everything that comes in my path. Eventually, we reach the end of the hideout. This is where we see Arcadia controlling all three of her admins with the Malamar behind her. Now she doesn't only have control of their minds, but also their bodies. And she very much seems done with me trying to interfere with her plans, so she throws all three of the admins at me, which results in me having to battle each and every one of them separately. So we defeat all three of their weakling teams with much ease, but then she realizes that if you want something done right, you have to do it yourself. And that's when we finally get to face Arcadia herself. She does have a pretty strong lead in Gyarados, but this Sea Dragon doesn't stand a chance against my Hurricane spamming Noctowl. We then wash away Rampardos back to the prehistoric times with a Surf, while Manishiwoof uses Play Rough to take out Electros, and my Monkey Ice Beams her Poison Seahorse. And lastly, her Ace Malamar is no match for my Certiture. Once defeated, Arcadia sees that she has to get rid of me here and now and starts surrounding me with her admins. Luckily for me, there's two people that were hiding in the shadows and are here to rescue me. One of them is Duncan's brother and the other we don't really know yet. They tell Arcadia to let me and Duncan go because apparently Duncan is a prince from a faraway island and his brother is here to save him from Arcadia's mind control. We demand that she releases all three of these victims, but she just goes ahead and says that their lives were not that great before she started mind controlling them, as some of them had no friends, ambitions, or anything else that made their life worth living. And Duncan even left his palace because his brother took what he wanted most, his throne, leaving him behind with nothing. His brother says that it doesn't matter because he would love to share his throne, and all of these reasons don't give her the right to control these people. But just when we're about to jump in and attack her, she teleports us out with her Malamar. So while these two locate where Sinistra will go next, I have to go and challenge the last trial, which ended up being the Steel Paradise. Here you need to go through a cave and talk to crystals, who will then open up pitfalls under you to send you to the next room, until you eventually reach the magma chamber where Altair will be waiting for you. He's incredibly excited that you've come to challenge him because you're the first one in a very long time that has completed all of the trials. And even though he might be the last trial, this is only the beginning of our road to glory. So let's see what this legendary assassin has in store for us. The first Pokemon up is his Skarmory, who gets one-shot by an Aqua spell with a burn at the end. Same could be said for his Mega Steelix, while Steelanist, Bronzong, and Tinkaton all took 2 hits to go down. Now that we have all 8 seals, we can enter the Great Paradise, a place that very few have ever had the courtesy to challenge. But before we can do that, Altair decides to take me to a special meeting, cause Luna has found out what our next target is going to be. She's gathered me, my friends, and all of the Guardians together so we can all fight Sinistra, who have been sighted at the Twilight Forest, a place that's normally off limit for trainers because the Pokemon there are way too hostile, but it was also the battlefield in the Great War between North and South Ariel, and the Guardians can't believe that she would embark her plans here on a place so sacred where so many souls have fallen and are laid to rest. It's incredibly disrespectful and we have to stop her before that place gets tainted. But Luna was also able to find out more information about Arcadia. It turns out she belongs to an ancient civilization that once used to live in this region peacefully, hence why she hates everything the people are doing to it. And it seems like she's going to return everything to the way she knew it all those ages ago. So it's time for us to roll out if we still want to live. As we reach the Twilight Megazone just before the forest, we see Domeshi doubting himself, thinking that he isn't strong enough to win this battle and that he's just here to hold everybody else back. But we remind him that he's a strong trainer who's traveled through the entire region without failing, and assure him that we cannot do this without his help. That's when he finally gets back to his senses and runs into the battlefield, ready to have our backs. We join shortly after and see that all of our friends are fighting to protect the region and save what we love most, the people closest to us. We had to go through many battles ourselves, mainly with the 3 admins. First, we defeat Jenna and Azalea with my Water Monkey's Aqua spells. Once they're defeated, we run into Duncan, who still hasn't come to his senses and doesn't realize that he's a prince yet. So we try to knock some sense into him by taking down all of his Pokemon yet again, but this is to no avail. After this, we finally reach the end of the forest and see Duncan's brother and Scarlet already confronting Arcadia. Unfortunately, we're too late. She has gathered both the dark and light minerals and starts the ritual, so she can summon the weapon that will free the region of its parasites. That's when a portal opens up and she enters it by saying,
"There will be no turning back. It's now or never."
So we waste no time and jump in straight after her and reach the ancestral place. Here we see Arcadia confronting the god of all Pokemon, Arceus, saying that she doesn't understand how he can watch his creations being captured, displaced, and used for evil. But Arceus claps back and doesn't tolerate this at all. If we want to prove our worth, we have to pass his test. But just when Arceus is about to spread out his judgment upon her, we burst onto the scene and Arcadia finally snaps. She doesn't understand how a kid like this can keep faulting her plans, but now it's time for her to end my life once and for all, as she challenges me to yet another battle and throws out her Gyarados, which ends up being incredibly strong as it takes out my Shogun type Gudra and Certiture. Most of my team might have been a little underleveled for this fight, but Chamanagua wasn't. He stood his ground and used Shadow Balls to take Gyarados to the grave. He then used Aqua Spell to take down Electros, Rampardos, Dragalge, her ace Malamar, and ultimately Ursaluna, showing her that you don't need the power of legendary Pokemon, you just need to give your Water Monkey some choice specs. But because she got defeated in front of Arceus, it's time for her judgment, as he turns her into stone. Now it was time for me to face his trial. And if we fail, we also die. So he summons the 3 legendary guardians and orders them to attack me. First up is the fire-fighting guardian Chimalayan. He stands no chance against my Water Monkey, as 2 Aqua Spells send him back to where he came from. Next up was the beautiful Grass Fairy type Sandalia. I did huge damage on her with my Noctowl's Hurricane and Chamanagua's Ice Beams, but just when I was about to take it out, she swapped places with her brother Thundalurian, the electric steel bird. And this bird really showed off its power by taking out 2 of my Pokemon before Chamanagua was able to come in again and use Aqua Spell. We then needed one more hit to destroy Sandalia, and just like that, we managed to overcome Arceus' trial. Arceus then tells me to run as he will hold back the Guardians while he closes the portal. And once we're done jumping through, all of our friends are waiting on the other side, as they're incredibly grateful for me for saving all of their lives and the entire region. But there is still one more thing to do before we can end off our journey of the Ariel region. So we go on our last adventure to Victory Road, where both of my best friends Domeshi and Cheria are waiting for me, as we defeat them in one last beautiful battle before we get to face the final trial. The entryway into the Grand Palace is lit up by fires, and when we walk up to the guardian of this place, he has one thing to say.
If you go past me, you'll have to face 4 more trials. The water, poison, bug, and psychic trials, each with their leaders.
But we're ready to face all of them and become the shardbearer of the Ariel region. The first one I decided to face is against a lady that saved my life once with her water creatures. Atlanta, the Siren of Ariel. She of course started off with a Politoed that set up the rain, but this gave me an opportunity to take it down with a couple of Giga Drays from Shogun Tide, just like the next Majestic Sea Snake Melodic. Her Mega Gyarados proved to be too much for my little dancing plant. Luckily my dog was able to play with it very roughly to take it out and force out Toxapex. All we needed to take down the bunker was a couple of airstrikes of extra sensory. Her Caracosta ended up falling to a couple of Aqua Spells, while the last Pokemon Sea-Tank got electrocuted by a Thunderbolt from Gudra. Our next opponent was the Bug-type Master and the woman who gave me my outfit, Memphis, and she immediately went out and sent the aliens on me with a UFO. But my Mexican Luchador and his thrusty hat used some Spectral Thieves to knock it out of the air. Chamanagua cursed her Galvantula with an Aqua Spell, while Noctowl blew out Leavanny with a Hurricane. Her regional form of Volcarona Mothasilk didn't do so well against my Gudra's Power Gems, and after her Mega Scizor and real Volcarona then fell to Aqua Spells, she ended up being defeated. Our next opponent led us to the Psychic Paradise, where Luna was ready to face me. She also might have saved my life, but that doesn't mean we're going easy on her. In fact, my dog is actually eating pretty good, as Indeedee gets destroyed by him, but he also decided to bite down on Mr. Mime's wife, Mrs. Mime. Slowking and Demisoul turned out to be the same, but Mega Metagross was too much for my little pupper. Luckily, we still have Certiture in the back who can kill it with Spectral Thief, just like the last Pokemon Gallade. This only leaves us with one more battle before we can challenge the Shardbearer. And that's against the person who fixed this entire place up for us, Veneria. She leads off with a Glimora that immediately sets up some toxic spikes, but a couple of extra sensories do tend to take it out, as her very own Gudra is up next. Unfortunately, Noctowl can't really take a Power Gem too well, so it was up to Certiture to finish it off with some sucker punches. Her upcoming Warnpedra, however, wasn't having any of it and took down my Mexican Luchador like it was nothing. Luckily, my own Gudra can take down this Viper wannabe with some power gems before Mega Gengar takes me down too. That's when Shamanagwa's Shadow Ball saved the day as Gengar, Crobat, and Salazzle all fell to it. Now there was only one more thing to do: enter the final room. This led me to the Grand Place, the spot where we would have our final battle with the strongest trainer in the region, Scarlet. She helped me in the end with taking down Arcadia and her goons, and for that I thank her. But that doesn't mean I won't be taking her place. Let's get this final show on the road. She starts off with a scary looking Drapion that can survive 2 power gems from Gudra and kill me with a couple of crunches. I swap in Shamanagwa and kill it with some aqua spells, but unfortunately we get poisoned by the toxic spikes it put down. The next Pokemon, Vikavolt, ended up trading blows with my Certiture and we ended up going down at the same time. That's when a Pokemon I've never seen before, Nigdramur, comes out. A Steel Dragon type that looks like it's ready to tear me to shreds with its awful teeth. It ended up taking down my Manishiwoof and Shamanagwa until Noctowl was able to deliver the finishing blow with an extra sensory again. With only 2 Pokemon remaining, her Mega Gardevoir hit the field and I knew I wasn't going to be able to kill this. So I used one of my Max Revive on Shamanagwa and brought it back out to kill the shiny Black Road Lady with more Shadow Balls. The second to last Pokemon in her arsenal was a Talonflame that got killed by 2 Shadow Balls because I was locked into them with Choice Specs, and the final Pokemon, Arboliva, took 3 confusions from Shogun Tite to turn from a tree into a bush. And just like that, we defeat Scarlet and become the Shardbearer of the Ariel region, as we have to protect it until somebody manages to defeat me. And that ends off the story of my journey through Pokemon Hidden Place.